Right, so who are you and why did you study architecture?
Good start. Paul Norbury. I studied architecture because it was too hard to study to be a car designer. Probably because we're probably taking steps back. I guess it goes back to Lego, cars, all those sort of things that I used to play with when I was a little kid. Cars was the most interesting thing, I suppose, to me then. And then I thought about product design. When I was 16, the school couldn't find a work placement that was anything like that. But there are some architects in Newcastle, where I come from, who would take someone. So I went there and actually really enjoyed it.
What would you say architecture is?
God, that's a deep question for number 2, isn't it?
Well, I think it's very commonly referred to as a kind of meeting point of art and science, and I've got to say that I agree with that to an extent. I think the science side of things is quite often lost, especially in university. But then in terms of a national concept of what architecture is perceived as, I think what we perceive architecture as is very different to what the general public perceive architecture as.
But it's not just about designing buildings anymore. It's about kind of problem solving, I suppose, a lot of what we do, and providing commercial value to a lot of things.
What is 5plus's design process?
Brief taking is probably one of the most important, if not the most important part of the process, and we've got quite a lot of experience of doing that, and that's fundamental. If you start off slightly in the wrong direction, you're going to end up a long way from where you probably should end up. We involve everybody in the design process. We're not one of those places that give people titles like design directors. It's not something we believe in. We think everyone should design, we think everyone should deliver. So every single person who works on a project will deliver that project. Anybody applies to us that says they're a design architect has got absolutely no chance of ever working here, and we never want to breed people to be that type of person.
Where does sort of architecture end and say graphic design begin?
One of the reasons that we do graphics and interiors, and we've always done interiors particularly, is that the boundaries are blurred. I think if you can do interiors of, say, an office or a hotel, you can design a better office or hotel building, and vice versa. When we're kind of designing interiors, because we do the architecture, we think we and other people in a similar situation can do a better job of the interiors or the architecture. So there isn't really a sort of a line where it stops, and graphics comes into a lot of what we do as well. It comes in, I suppose, on 2 levels. One's on things like signage, manifestations, wayfinding, branding sort of stuff, but another one's just in communication. So much of what any architect or architecture student has to do these days is effectively communicate what they want to do, and that's talking, drawing, models, visualization. And one of the things that we wanted to make sure we could do in every document or presentation we do is have a proper qualified graphic designer sort of help us maintain and manage our graphic standards.
I think there's more of a line between something that's purely graphical, and again, going back to, it's about designing spaces. You don't really make space, but you manipulate it. And then graphic design works on the same principles of, say, aesthetics, but I think there's more behind architecture that does separate it out. I can't, again...
I know what you're saying. I can see that, in terms of how graphic design isn't necessarily fitting with architecture in terms of, one's about space and one can be about imagery, but I think in terms of us as architects, we're able to do both of those with the skill sets we develop at university.
So do you think with these creative disciplines, do you think they can always learn from each other?
Yes, I think so. Certainly the interiors and architecture. Yeah, between those, it's not often we do a building that doesn't have any interiors in it. Not often anybody really does a building, because that would say that the building's just about the shell and the interior is just about the inside. And it certainly never, before an interior design was invented, it certainly wasn't a separation.
How much of the work you did as a student influenced the work you do now?
I don't know if that much of it does, to be honest. I haven't thought about my university work in a few years now. What's it, 13 years since I graduated at Liverpool. I think the processes and suppose what I kind of learnt about kind of working with people. It's always one of the difficult things I remember from uni. And when we interview people now, quite often people are a little bit cagey about their group projects, or sometimes apologetic, and you can sometimes sense there's a bit of tension because usually someone didn't do as much work as everyone else. And I can remember that at uni, a similar situation, but that's kind of the real world. Everyone has to collaborate. The best things come out of collaboration. So I think some of that stuff was useful, kind of almost forcing you to start working with other people rather than just think of it as your project as an individual. And I think it was pretty rigorous in the kind of the thinking and the design and all that stuff which is really unique to our profession, that nobody else is really ever going to try and pinch from us because they can't.
I wouldn't say that there's obviously the very tangible things of what you make diagrams or models or whatever in student life, and then you bring those skills to the practice. But I would say it's more to do with the way you think about spaces, about buildings, and that then informs, say, your diagram work or your plan development or drawing skills.
What would you say is the hardest part of the design process?
I'd say the initial concept, personally. I'm not sure all the people would agree with that. I think it's, in terms of the design process, architects can fit within at different points within that process.
And from your own experience, what piece of advice would you give to students studying architecture now?
I think you've got to obviously be aware of everything that's happening around you. Try and understand, and I mean in the architecture profession, and try and get a real good understanding so you can kind of almost mesh and sink into practice when you get there. You don't need to pretend to be something you're not. Just be yourself. Always just be yourself. The best thing I think you can do is just work really hard to try and get yourself in the best position to get some good experience when you leave university, because it's a bit like the brief taking, I suppose. If you kind of start off in the right direction, you're more likely to go where you want to be, I think.
Mine would be to be fearless. You just need to embrace it and be willing to get things wrong, because I think that's the way you develop and learn and improve as a designer and an architect. If you don't do anything, you're not going to get anywhere. And just be fearless.
I'd say enjoy it. Just again, go crazy. Just explore everything that you've got time to, and just really enjoy it. I think if you don't enjoy it, then that shows in your work, and that's nothing to badmouth or anything. If somebody doesn't like it, then maybe it's not the thing for them, and there's always other things. As long as you enjoy it, that's the best thing.